Welcome to Shut Up and Sit. I'm Yetta Stansel, a consciousness coach and consultant. I'm on a mission to bring mindfulness to the modern world. Each week, we will offer ancient healing practices, real-world examples, and the latest research in neurobiology and behavior change into fun conversation that invites you to wake up your highest self. Now, let's go shut up and sit. All right, welcome back to the show, everybody. Here, as always, Yetta, so glad to be here to join you today. And I have an incredibly awesome guest here with me, Eric. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
How are you? So Eric and I have known each other for quite a while. You're going to hear some really amazing stuff in the next, 45 minutes or so. But I asked Eric to come in today, in particular, especially in this episode, because we're now going into chapter 7, which is all about stress. And when I think of stress, I think of you, Eric.
Well, thank you.
Actually, when I think of Eric Brown, when we first met, I definitely think of stress.
Totally.
And I want you to tell the listeners the story of how we met and where you were in your life, and definitely how this work has benefited you. But I'm wondering if before we get into how we met, you might want to just share a little bit with the listeners about Eric in general. And you can start, I'm going to say you can start wherever. And I told my mom to start wherever. And she started we were here for 4 days. I was like, Mom, no, but really, I want you to just think about when people ask you the question, who is Eric? What do you say?
I think it starts back as a child.
God.
Back in. No, I think that the things that really started to shape me when I was in high school, parents had massive financial issues, which led to a journey of going on my own early, and then ultimately quitting college and defaulting on the student loans, which was like burning the ships.
Yeah.
And which led to a journey of starting my first company, and then just on from there.
Yeah. So you're what we would call a serial entrepreneur.
Yes.
Yeah. Autonomy, freedom is kind of a core need for you. You definitely love to pave your own way. But that story that you talked about with your parents, and that's kind of where we started our work together. How when you look back at your life, how important was that event to really helping you to become the entrepreneur and the leader that you are today?
It's just channeling the energy in a positive, productive way for me. It really helped me push forward to the things that I didn't know I could do.
Yeah.
And having the faith and not worrying about what if.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And so being someone who's an entrepreneur who owns a couple of businesses today, and I would say successful businesses. I mean, you're a successful entrepreneur, and your story as you led in, you went to school, you left school, but there was some real meaningful moments there for you that really inspired your need to innovate and create. But would you say you've always been an innovator and a creator?
Yeah, I think as a kid, the first book I ever read that I really enjoyed was the biography of Thomas Edison, who's been my superhero, my childhood. And watching my father tinker and do things, I think just where I kind of naturally pivoted to making things better.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when we met, you were actually at an event for the Virginia Council of CEOs.
Yes.
I was given a keynote speech and talking about kind of the dysfunctional dynamics of behaviors in the bottom line in business. And then kind of just back to this whole topic of stress, where would you say you were in your life? And let's just start professionally. We'll get into personal, you guys, if we can fit it all in. Where were you professionally in your businesses and in your leadership development? And that was what, 5 years ago? No, longer than 5.
Almost 7.
7? Okay, almost 7 years ago. So what was going on in Eric, CEO, entrepreneur, sitting in the audience at the Virginia Council of CEOs that was starting to kind of connect with what I was talking about?
I think I was just tired of the grind of building the business and wanting more. And when we were at the conference, you started talking about thinking, feeling, actions.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is different. And that stood out for me. And then, and I was familiar with subconscious through reading, Master Key to Riches or Think and Grow Rich from Napoleon Hill. And that I read that when I was 19. So that really kind of called out to me. Something was different.
Yeah.
And I was really curious at that point.
So would you say you were stressed out?
Oh yeah, totally.
I'm going to give you the lead in because I remember where you were. So when you think about the stress that you were experiencing as a leader, as an entrepreneur, what was going on for you in your life personally?
Just overwhelm, probably a verge of like a second nervous breakdown, just the stress of trying to manage it all.
Yeah.
And running 2 businesses at that point. And it was just like a pendulum swing, chasing one problem to the next, and just really unsure of myself in my own business.
So you had read a lot of books.
Yes.
You had been to conferences. So
Yes.
you did, before we met, what would you say your process of personal development or leadership development had been? What were you doing?
Solving some other problem or something new. What was the new thing, the next new thing to learn? It became a kind of a stimulus and a response to learn something new, and it was exciting, but that became rote after a while.
Yeah. Yeah. And so this stress response, and it's really why I put this chapter in the book. But when we talked about that and when you and I connected, that's part of the problem is we just get caught up and we get addicted to doing.
Yes.
And so we think, well, if I'm stressed out over here, if I do this here, then if I go over here and do that. And it was a process and a problem. And you're right. When I was doing that lecture, I was thinking we're not talking about the elephant in the room. Mm-hmm. All we're doing is making more stress for leaders. And not just leaders in business, but leaders in life that, stress is actually under our control. We're not victims mm-hmm. of the stories and the patterns in the past, which you and I got a chance to start to sit down. I remember we sat down and had lunch together one of those days that we were at the conference and just talked a lot about what you had learned, and you'd been a prolific lifelong student. I mean, you knew, there's no lack of knowledge. It's not like Eric Brown doesn't know anything. Right. You've probably read close to as many books as I have, if not more. Mm-hmm. And so, but it was really ultimately at the core of the work that we do. But your testimony's in this chapter for a reason. You finally realized the belief that you had around why stress was happening and what you could do about it. And so what did you realize about your own stressful life that you were living?
I think the biggest thing was not just reacting to it, just taking a moment to stop and think the thought and how to think about the thought. Mm-hmm. And once I started to change the thoughts, I didn't react the way I naturally had reacted so much before.
Yeah.
I remember it was like one weekend I was just so frustrated that something happened in the business, some other problem, and then I was texting the employees and I was just so upset and reacting to it, and then having a conversation is like breaking it down, like how would people react to you, right? And then that was just, and then the other conversation that we had that was really impactful for me is we create our own problems.
Yeah,
the mirror.
Hello, wake up call. I mean, and nobody wants to hear that. And
right.
You were like, okay, I can hear that.
Yeah.
You were ready to hear that.
Yeah. And I think just starting to understand how I was showing up, if I can control myself, I can control my environment.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a wake up call for me.
And when you started to learn that process, what did you start to notice about your own stress, your stress response?
I think once I started to stop and think about it, and I can almost see the old Eric and the new Eric, like an out of body experience. Mm-hmm. And because I would go to the negative, and then I had really put some thought on the positive, the curiosity aspect of things. And I could just feel the stress before it happened. And like, wait a minute, I see what's happening now. So the awareness kind of woke up, Yeah,
you filled in the blank. There you go. I was getting ready to be like, I wonder if he's going to say the word awareness. If not, I'm going to have to say it for him. Because that's really what we started working on. And in this stress response, and I say this all the time, I'm going to say it probably every day of my life for the rest of my life, but I didn't realize until I did the research, and most of my clients didn't realize, and you know this statistic, that when we get into a stress response, this part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, actually goes offline, and our IQ drops by 50%. Mm-hmm. Just this alone going offline, right, yep. makes the IQ drop. And then you're right. Then as entrepreneurs, as business leaders, and you're managing the worry about debt and not getting enough sleep, and you're thinking, I've got to work harder, I've got to work longer. And I'll never forget, you said this to me in the beginning, and you were like, I get up at 4:30 in the morning, like I do this, I do that. I was exhausted listening to it. And I was like, my God, who wants to live like that? Now, now my story that I was in the same churn. And when I hit the wall, and you've heard my podcast episode, when I took that dive off, the ego just jumped off the high dive into the pool with no water. I was done. I lived that life and I thought, this is awful. Why are we doing this as entrepreneurs, as business leaders? Yes, I had a lot of success and I had done a lot of things, but you know what? I was miserable. You were miserable. I'd be willing to bet you the majority of the leaders that were sitting in that conference room with us that day were miserable. And I happen to know a lot of them, and some of them still are miserable. Doesn't mean they don't love what they do, but they're miserable in the sense of it's a constant churn.
Yep.
Make money, lose money, make money, lose money, borrow money, make money. There's this space of entrepreneurship. And what I introduced was something that said, you're right, it was thinking, feeling, behaving, which is taking action. But what if you could learn that process and you could start to wake up and see how your beliefs and your human behavior impacted the bottom line of your business? And I remember one time saying to you, I was like, so maybe you don't have to get up at 4:30 and walk across hot coals and, and put yourself through all this self-abuse and self-negative talk before you even get to the office. I would be a miserable leader. I wouldn't want to work for you if you arrived at the office and you were already cocked and loaded with all of the stuff that wasn't working.
Yep.
And we started chipping away at the belief systems.
Yeah, I think it's like the plus and minus. I would start the day in the negative.
Oh, yeah.
And the whole day would be negative.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then just getting to zero was just a huge accomplishment to be more neutral. But, but starting the day in the positive, well, then you're in control.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's taken, it's been 7 years that we've been working together. And no, I don't keep him around because I'm making him dependent upon me, you guys. We talk about this openly in the relationship of how this kind of, this work of narrative coaching, the work that we do, is to help you find your own wisdom, not for you to call me the coach and consultant and say, yeah, I don't know, but you do. You've worked with lots of coaches and consultants, how that dynamic works. So we kind of went layer by layer by layer over the years to help you really start to do the work to understand what's going on inside of Eric. Who is Eric? What does Eric want?
Well, I remember in the beginning, they're like, Eric, if you need me, just text me in those emergencies. And then what began over time is I began to process my own emergencies in my mind.
Oh my gosh, you guys, I have to tell you. So when Eric and I first started working together, and remember, he just told you he'd be, he was in negative mode before he'd get to the office. And that's how it works. It's an evolution, and I have compassion and I understand how my clients work. But in the beginning, you would be texting me in the middle of the night, early in the morning. It'd be like 2 a.m., 4 a.m., all these ideas or questions or thoughts. And in the beginning, because I knew where you were, and I eventually was like, okay, so Eric, we're going to have to put, some guidelines, like you can text me SOS when you need me. And then there would be SOS 911. And we'd get on the phone because it was real legitimate stuff. When you guys do this work, you wake some shit up. Yeah. And it starts coming out from all different angles. And what I love now, and I think we can look back and laugh, is where you were then and where you are today. It's like, you're right. It's like there are two different people. If Eric Brown from 7 years ago was here, what do you think he would look like, and how do you think he'd act?
Back then?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I remember the conference room.
Yeah. So talk about that.
Yeah. So I would have my meetings with my team, and I would be sitting in the corner at a conference table. And that's just,
It was like he was hired help. He's the CEO of the company. We walk in the first time into the boardroom, and he's you're in the corner.
Yeah, just subconsciously, I was like, minimal,
Yeah. And so what does it look like today when you show up in your company?
Naturally, at the head of the table, I think I speak with more power in my voice of just who I am and confidence. And it's very different.
Yeah. And managing that stress response and knowing when you co-create it was a real wake-up call for you. And being someone that's watched that evolution and seen that growth pattern, which now when you text me, it's funny because you'll remember this a couple weeks ago, you sent me a question and you said, hey, should I spend this money to go do this thing on the such and such with these people on the coast of Antarctica, and Jimmy Buffett's going to be on the yacht, and should I go? And I'm just like, nope. That was my response. And you responded and said, I don't think that's nope, don't go. I think that's nope, I'm not going to answer this question. Am I right? And I'm like, yep. Because here's what I love about this work and what's different in the personal development space around narrative coaching, the work that we've done. And when you dig in this kind of shut up and sit language you've heard me cultivate over the years, is going within to find the wisdom and the truth and the knowledge inside of you, inside of Eric. Not finding Yetta's knowledge, not being the second-rate version of I love Tony Robbins and Grant Cardone and all these guys that you followed that we've all been introduced to in leadership development in the business world. However, that does not work for everyone. And it's like holding a beach ball underwater is what you've heard me say over the years, because if you don't get your belief systems in alignment with your vision and your dreams, your business outwardly is a manifestation of who you are inwardly.
That's right.
And so when we think about the stress and where you were, this bundle of stress and, trying to make things happen, your business 7 years ago was where, if you were thinking about if it's a manifestation of who you were then, where was your business 7 years ago?
I think a fraction of the size is what it is today.
Yeah.
Revenue, people, impact, just very different.
Because you were constricted in that stress response where everything in you was like, I've got to do more and I've got to hold on. And you were, like you said, literally your body language in the corner of that room was, I'm here, but I'm not really here. And now when you sit at the head of the table, everything that you've been doing on the inside is now manifesting in the outside.
I think it just comes to how you interact with your people.
Yeah.
Right. And I was micromanaging everything 7 years ago, making every decision, and people look to me for every decision. And today I ask them, what do you think?
Yeah.
And sometimes they don't even ask me the question, which is great.
Yeah.
They just make the decision.
Yeah.
I think that's different.
Well, and one thing I love, and I'm kind of looking here at the beginning of chapter 7 that we worked on. And, when we started 7 years ago, I was teaching all of this, but I didn't have this consolidated in kind of the process, if you will. And you guys, it's not a process meaning this is the beginning and end. It's really meant to be a guide or a framework. Because as you know, we modify things to meet you where you are, Eric. And there's a lot of self-reflection, self-referral. But in the beginning of chapter 7, this is one of my favorite quotes by Deepak Chopra. And it says, the wounding becomes sacred when we are willing to release our old stories and to become the vehicles through which the new story may emerge into. And when you think about the story you told yourself 7 years ago and the story you told your employees and your business partners and colleagues and everyone else, what's the difference between that story and the story you now tell yourself in the world?
I think back then I was trying to be all things to all people and be the impact myself, lead the charge. And now I still want to lead the impact, but through other people. I think it's just different.
Yeah.
And then the awareness, I think the other thing is having confidence in my own decisions and following my intuition versus keep looking for the next thing, the next answer.
Yeah. And, when I think about this quote about wounds, and you've heard me say this, and of course on the show, listeners have heard me say this, but, I hold the belief that our wounds become our wisdom. And it was another thing in leadership development for us as entrepreneurs, thinking, well, what was the wounding that caused me to see things differently, to cause me to want to create a business, your innovative kind of side of you that's like, I see a problem, right? Let's call the wound, it's a problem, whatever. But now I'm going to come in and I'm going to create a solution in the world. So when you look at the work we did to help you unravel those beliefs, to see the wounding, and we talked about that story, and you brought it up in the beginning of the episode here, but to see the story of what happened with your dad as an entrepreneur and how that propelled you, we went all the way back to that core wound and actually helped you see it not as you're a victim and you're now going to suffer the rest of your life, but we helped you to see the wisdom that experience gave you. So I'm wondering if you can talk about that transition of wound into wisdom.
I think when I was in high school, my dad owned a business. My mom worked in the business. They went bankrupt. We lost everything. And that 6 years of going through the bankruptcy, I felt powerless as a kid, and then that was one of my limiting beliefs. I just felt powerless. And so what really kind of propelled me from that experience was just putting a lot more energy to not hold back. It's like the fight or the flight. I went into fight mode.
Yeah.
And that gave me really the energy to move forward in life. And that's why I started my business. I took taking some risks because I didn't want to feel powerless.
Yeah.
So that the good and the bad side of that is I operate with the limiting belief of powerless, but it actually kind of propelled me watching my parents be powerless.
Yeah. And so that wounding, because I remember the very first one of our first sessions, and one of the biggest worries that was causing you the most stress in your business was finances.
Absolutely.
Which, hello guys. So I just have to insert commercial break. If you want to start a business, you will have to deal with financial stress and strife. Okay, there's this illusion. I love the startup world now. All these kids are like, I'm going to go ask for $1 million. And I'm like, really? Because I took out a home equity loan. I went all in. Some of us go all in and we take risk and we don't get that money back. So it's a different world, but finances are a real serious stressor for entrepreneurs because we have ideas and we don't know if they're going to stick, but we're so committed to our idea that we're willing to risk it all and bring that energy out into the world with no guarantees. And so the stress of the finances, and I remember we talked about this and I said, this is where narrative coaching and this kind of shutting up and sitting and going within self-inquiry process is different in this work. And you know, because you've experienced it. But I said, so tell me, when was the first time you felt powerless or worried about money? And you brought up the experience of your dad being an entrepreneur and what happened and how that was really traumatic for you. I mean, and we talked about when you came around the corner from school and the boat was gone.
Yeah. My father operated his business. Was working a job at the shipyard he was an eye doctor, so he had a job and a business. And the thing that my dad and I would do all the time would go fishing. That was our thing. And then the boat was on the side of the house. It was a yellow boat. It was a 14-foot yellow boat with a outboard motor on it. And one day it was gone, and I was just devastated. Like, Dad, why did you sell the boat? He goes, I don't have time to go fishing anymore.
Yeah. And what where that took you in that space of that conversation, we started to do what I call that existential kind of detective work, where we started saying, okay, so every time you worry about money, you go all the way back to coming around the corner and the boat's gone.
Yep.
That's that stress response in your body that says, money, oh shit, the boat's going to be gone. Money, oh shit. And so these are patterns, you guys. They're belief systems that we carry. So the stress response, yes, it needs logic, and we need to understand, why are we stressed? What are we stressed about? And we can take the thinking, feeling, behaving and kind of weave that into this chapter. But the more important part here is that's a choice to be stressed out. That's a choice. You learned how to rewrite the story. Mm-hmm. You said, you know what? I'm not going to be stressed out about the boat anymore. I'm not going to be stressed out about money anymore, because the very mechanisms that you use to learn to survive from that wounding, you said, I'm going to actually convert into my wisdom. And you do make good decisions with money, because you don't want your kids to come around the corner and see that the house and everything's been taken. And when you learned to bring that out in the room and say that, my deepest fear is I will lose it all and my family will be bankrupt and destitute. I don't want that for my family. You started to realize how to convert the narrative and story to say, that's not going to happen. That's not going to play out again.
Well, I think when I asked myself this question, would you bet on Eric?
Yeah. As
an investment? And I look back to what I have done, I'm absolutely. That just kind of resets me.
Yeah.
I'm a good investment.
Yeah.
Right. I can do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And cultivating the belief system that maybe what happened with your dad, as you mentioned earlier, you expanded the awareness around that, and you looked at, money doesn't have to stress me out. Mm-mm. Money can actually be I can hold a different belief system. And so the stress response, as you got your belief system rewritten and then you rewired it and started to show up in the world with a new narrative or new story around it, you actually saw that stress actually just kind of dissipated.
Yes.
You don't have the same stress today that you had 7 years ago.
No, not at all.
No. And I love that for you, because that means then everything else in life actually has a different impact. And so for those of you listening and watching, you get to choose how you show up in the world. And like you're hearing from Eric, when you show up in a different way, you will get different responses.
I think I changed my narrative. I think I live by a saying, create for fun and impact, not gain.
Yeah.
And that just helps me rewire everything, because I was so focused on the gain, what I'm going to get out of this from my narrative from childhood, But the reality is, if you love what you do and have impact, the money will come.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Because and I said this in another episode, but the truth is the people that are successful in the world, the people who make a lot of money in the world, and whatever your definition of success is, money is only one way of defining success for some people. Whatever your definition of success is, and I've said this, it just means that person possesses a belief system that they're able to materialize or manifest that. It's that simple.
That's right.
And when you heard that, you were like, wait a minute. And I'm like, so you get what you believe. If you believe there's never enough money, they're always going to be coming around the corner to take the boat, then what's going to happen is you're going to show up in the world and actually keep that story alive by showing up in a way that says, please keep me on the verge of bankruptcy at all times, because I don't, and then you'll see it was a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Well, your subconscious will keep making decisions, will lead you to what you don't want versus what you do want. So just thinking about what you want, you'll gravitate towards those things, and you make better decisions subconsciously, consciously.
Yeah,
the whole thing.
So as we went through this, and we're kind of in this, I did place you in particular in the chapter of stress because you were really stressed out when we met, and you overcame the belief around stress and the belief around so many other things. But now I think about your leadership development, and I think about the years that you've kind of unraveled and moved through these layers. And in the early days, do you remember I was like, go buy a yellow boat or get a picture of a yellow boat. We wanted you to start to see the yellow boat every day. No one's taking the boat. Mm-hmm. And to use that narrative, no one's going to take the boat. We're good. We're safe. But the number one thing that leaders are supposed to do and create, we don't talk about this from the main stage either, is to create psychological safety for themselves first. And then that allows them to create psychological safety for others.
That's right.
So how do you now show up and take this work you've been doing inside out into the world that allows and creates psychological safety for others?
I think just when something happens, not to react to it, but allow people, I think in business, allow people to make mistakes and have compassion and not react. Just give them the space that I give myself, or I didn't give myself back then, but just giving them the safety of making a decision and making a mistake, and it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think just taking a step back. I think when we talked about it, you'd say, what's the worst that can happen? And then when you
sometimes you're like, oh, it could be pretty bad. Yeah.
When you really break it down,
yeah.
What's the worst that can happen? And you think about what's the worst and what's the best.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes it's probably better than you ever could have guessed when you let go.
Yeah.
And just thinking about that. And so I've made some really bad decisions. And I think, wow, I have people that can probably make better decisions than I can.
Yeah.
In the right areas, so the aspects of what they do. So giving them the safety of those things is just, I think oftentimes you'll probably do better giving them room to have the safety of making a decision and making the wrong one.
Yeah. And it's so great because I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, gosh, in like 45 minutes, we're supposed to put 7 years of like, and tell me about the time when. It's impossible to put it all in, but as I'm kind of according it out and kind of shrinking it back in my mind as you're talking and remembering and reminiscing all along the way, and then seeing the book and the online course come to fruition, you did all this work. Literally, if you went and read every single page in the book, it would kind of chronicle in the very early days. We went through all this work. You learned thinking, feeling, behaving. You learned repetition. We talked about theta brainwave. We talked about the mind.
4 S's.
All of it. The mind and body being connected. We talked about, we have dug so deep into all of this, and you've done all of this work, and you've been such an incredible student. But it wasn't to learn something you didn't know. It was to learn not just about Eric Brown. It was to learn about Eric in the sense of being Eric. And that to me, right, because when you showed up, you knew a lot about a lot, and you knew a lot about Eric, but did you ever have an experience of being Eric?
Yes.
And what was that like?
Oh my gosh. It's like being a child again.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just so refreshing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know, I'm not going to let you cry on the show because there are going to be people that I could take him there because he's a really sensitive, but emotionally very connected, grounded human being, which I love about you. And the space of when we talk about going back to that childlike wonder, that's really at the core of mindfulness. And I talk about mindfulness, but I don't talk about it in a religious sense by any means, because to me, it's not a religion. It's always been like, why wouldn't you just shut up and sit down and go inside yourself and figure out what's going on inside of you instead of of reading about how what everybody else did. But when you went inside and you said, well, who is Eric? Who am I? Mm-hmm. And you started to connect back with the essence of Eric. You started to feel the truth of Eric. That's when everything shifted for you. And I remember watching that as a coach going, now Eric's got it. Now Eric doesn't text me in the middle of the night. Now Eric is, I'm good. Mm-hmm. And then the calls started getting to where you would celebrate how you contained and managed. But we did introduce lots of mindfulness techniques for you along the way. And I'm curious if, you could talk about some of those mindfulness tools. How important did you think they were in addition to reading and logic and language, but the shutting up and really going within and being with Eric? What was that like, and what tools did you find the most helpful?
I think there are times I've used meditation, but I think the biggest thing is just silence. And so I have young kids, and so they get up, some of them get up early, and so I do get up early before they get up, just to have silence, mm-hmm. not just to not think about a lot, just to sit there. And, sometimes I do write out my self-talk or just to keep my mind attuned, but just the time to myself is probably the most grounding thing for me. And then for me, which is probably different, is music. Yeah. So when I'm in my true space, I like to dance and now sing. And I would dance in front of the employees. They're like, what is going on here? But that is me, right? Yeah. The true joy.
Yeah. And you didn't, that was not somebody that showed up 7 years ago.
No.
And when I see you dance, and I've seen your posts on social media dancing, and now you're doing singing lessons, and it's so fun because you're right, there's this space. And that's what I love about mindfulness is it doesn't have to, and I've said this a lot on the show, but it doesn't have to be so serious. People talk about like, you got to shave your head and you got to wear burlap and you got to let go of all these I don't want to let go of the fun pleasures in life. You don't want to let go of the fun pleasures in life. Music, and I'm gonna tippy toe you into this one, but the archetypal play and the energy of different characters. And so we did a little bit of work, and this is part of my one-on-one coaching is when I get into going into kind of the embodiment side. So we have thinking, feeling, behaving, which Eric's very familiar with. And that's kind of the shutting up and sitting and going within and figuring out, what am I thinking? Well, what am I thinking about the thoughts that I'm thinking? How's that creating my feeling? How's that driving my behavior? You know this like that back of your hand. Well, the other side of the equation is, now that I know thinking, feeling, behaving, it's I'm going to show up and how do I behave with a new belief system that creates a feeling that naturally produces a byproduct of a thought for me, which makes the process that much easier in the brain. And role-playing and archetypal energy is one of my favorite ways to get people on the other side of the equation. And when we started this from the logic side, you were really great about learning. But when I brought in the play side and I said, so who would Eric Brown be if he was a character on the big screen? And what would he look like? What would he sound like? And what was your answer? You knew right away. You were like, I know who he is.
Braveheart.
It was Braveheart. Now, I'm going to ask you, Eric, because there are thousands, millions of listeners, maybe by the point the show airs. I'm kidding. Do you own an actual Braveheart costume?
I do. I actually own the Braveheart sword. It was funny. The sword was behind my door, and I would close my door when I was on conference calls, Zoom calls, and people would always see the sword in the corner. And
they're probably like, Eric, what's going on over there?
I got so impassioned by watching the movie Braveheart that I bought a Braveheart costume, and I remember having a conversation with you. I wanted to go out and wear my costume. There's that one scene in Braveheart where they're getting ready to go to battle. And like, come on, people, you can believe in your dreams, And I'm like, I'm gonna go out and do it. I'm gonna rent a horse. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna bring the horse in the warehouse. like Eric.
I'm like, great idea. Role play that this weekend with the kids, but can we dial it back in a little bit? And it was so fun though to see that side of you, and even to be here with you today, to just have that humor and that fun that's really who you are. And literally one of your businesses is the name. I'm gonna name it if it's okay. I mean, Fulfilltopia. I mean, the fulfillment of this utopia, this magical creative space, and kind of the shipping and receiving and fulfillment world. But I thought, Eric, that's in your business. It just needs to come out more. Maybe not the horse in the warehouse more.
Right.
However, we did get you out of stressed out, bogged down, miserable Eric. Oh, it's terrible. It's never going to work out. To Eric that's now fantasizing about bringing a horse in and painting his face blue and and there's swords. And that got you into the energy of the inner freedom, the liberation, the real Eric that was inside of you. The real person that's inside of all of us wants and knows liberation and freedom and expansiveness and joy is our birthright.
Absolutely.
And that's what shutting up and sitting in this kind of magic of silence allows us, is to create some space. And I go like this, like space to open up our minds and our heart, but even our body to say, yeah, how do I bring that out? And so you now know you can bring Braveheart out literally and figuratively into any experience, not always with the horse and the sword. But sometimes we talk about maybe when you're on a call and people don't see you, or you're struggling with an old belief kind of creeping back in, you pick up the sword or you go watch a scene from the movie to tap back into the other belief is inside of me too.
I think it's just really just tapping into the energy, right?
Yeah.
And so once I tap into the energy, being brave, which is, for me, I'm a Leo. Being courageous is something that I've always battled with. And when I think of Braveheart, I just step into my courage.
Yeah.
And then heart, I'm all about heart,
Yeah.
so I think it's just one of the things that just kind of naturally bubble up to my archetype.
Yeah. And it's that playfulness. And I think, when we're in this whole kind of experience of stress in the book, so for folks listening, if you're reading and following along with the book, we get into a lot of stress statistics, and I kind of think about, all the stuff that's in here, but there was a TED Talk, because you've done all this homework. There's a TED Talk in here by Kelly McGonigal about making stress your friend. And what I'm thinking about is you're talking about Braveheart, and you think about the stress that he, was a real person in history. He literally lived through the stress and the uprising and what he fought for and what he believed in. And so the battle of stress, making that battle your friend, working with the stress that was coming at you, as opposed to letting it trigger a limiting belief inside of you that said, it's not that I'm not enough. It's actually that I am enough, in the sense that I know how to rise to meet the occasion.
Right. I've got this, right?
Yeah.
Just, it is what it is.
And so would you say that in mindfulness and in this work of our coaching together, that was just something you had to spend some time with just over and over again until it got to the point where it just became an automatic response for you?
In the beginning, it was very foreign. I remember reacting to it and feeling really unsettled by the new thoughts, the new experiences, and then it became more familiar, and then it took a while to get really truly integrated, and so now I'm at the place where I do get triggered sometimes. We all do, but it's more now wired into my body,
Yeah. And then that's that part where, and this is part of the work of mindfulness of, I talk about this, and you've heard me say this, like we lean in and then we lean out. We lean in and we lean out. We lean. And so we touch it and then we kind of let it go. We touch it. And then there is this neuroplasticity. That's why I'm in my work, and you've heard me talk about this, but the science of how we can rewire our brain that does rewire our nervous system. And so like you said, you still get stressed out, but because you've been practicing sitting in that quiet, silent, still space to start your day with space and freedom, as opposed to the opposite, expecting the day to give you space and freedom, which you now know doesn't work that way.
Sure.
You start your day with space and freedom, cultivating silence, and you bring that archetypal, real, fun, true Eric out right out of the gate. What happens is over time that becomes your norm. And there is kind of a threshold of the first couple of years we were kind of tearing lots of stuff down in your inner world, rebuilding stuff in the outer world. But this experience, now that we're 7 years in, you've really transitioned and are showing up more on the other side of the belief and the story. And I want our listeners to hear this too. The old belief never goes away.
Right.
We're not taking away the story of Eric, the boat, the trauma, the wounding. Whatever you experienced is still very real. But we've taught you, and you've now learned a way to go, well, I can see that side of the story, but I also can hold space to see another narrative or another story.
The duality.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And being able to name it when it shows up. I think that's just... I was at an event recently, and then things got triggered, but I was able to name it. And I understood what was happening, and so then I could manage it and reintegrate it.
Yeah, and I love that, because that awareness is a skill that will help you as a leader. It helps you as a husband. It helps you as a father, a friend, a community member. And the truth is, we're all doing the best we can with the level of awareness we're at.
Yes.
And, and I thought about this, actually yesterday I was down here at the studio and we were recording some other content. And I even think about where I was, 7 years ago, 10 years ago, in the evolution of my work. And as I was kind of driving down into the city to park, I saw this gentleman standing on the street and, big guy, super overweight, headphones in, on his phone, like chain smoking a cigarette. I mean, we're talking morbidly obese, literally just kind of no awareness of what was going on, cuts off in front of me in traffic, like literally spits this gross, like hawks a lug in the middle of the street in front of me. And I'm just sitting there. I'm watching this whole experience. And I thought, gosh, Yetta 10 years ago would have been like, so judgmental, so disgusting, attacking this man with my thoughts and my judgments. And this is where I'm at now with mindfulness, is to be in a space to hold compassion and to say, gosh, what would a person have to believe about themselves, and what suffering is this person trying to numb and get away from and run from, that they're not able to deal with, that the smoking and the eating and all the things that I was observing, that this was what this person was carrying around. The compassion. And if we can cultivate compassion for ourselves and then offer that to other people, and silently in my mind, as I saw this gentleman just cut across traffic, I thought, I just wished him, I said, may you be kindful, may you be mindful, may you live with ease, and just sent him some mindfulness thoughts. Because the truth is, and this, you were that person. Mm-hmm. Okay, you were, and I'm not saying you smoked, but you were that person who was overweight, unhealthy, wound up and so out of your mind and literally just distracted, that the truth is we all at some point in our life have been that version.
Sure.
And I love now where my work has taken me, but where my work is helping me take my clients is, that's what I mean. If we cultivate kindness and compassion, our healing impacts the healing of the world. Because that energy exchange of me witnessing that was so radically different from where I was 10 years ago. And when you see yourself show up with your team, your employees, your career, your community now, when you think about the impact your healing has on them, what does that bring up for you?
For me or for them?
For you.
Freedom, mentally, emotionally.
Yeah.
Time.
Yeah.
Just space to be, just be me.
Yeah. And when you think about the meaning that your healing offers the healing of others, what have people shared with you about how now you're showing up that's impacting their healing?
I think giving them the space and helping them learn or understand what's happening with them and how they're showing up, kind of helping them see for themselves their own awareness.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when we first started doing this work, and I literally have some new clients who the other day, they were like, well, I've got to tell everybody they're doing it all wrong. And I'm like, whoa, slow your roll. You remember that place?
Well, I know what you're going to say.
Mm-hmm. And then I love it because one of the ladies was like, well, if this is the one limiting belief, I want to know, I've got 3 other ones and I want to attack them and hit them all. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. And we remember, because you were there too, when you show up and you already are something, then you don't have to tell other people that they are not it. Mm-hmm. They will naturally step into your, what I call isness. And actually my mom uses that word, isness. I mean, she's a life coach, but when you already are something and then they see and feel the experience of Eric, the confident, courageous, calm leader, you don't have to tell them, I am now confident, calm, and courageous, and my stress response is reduced. They experience you differently, which is a domino effect that then says, oh, I can show up differently because I'm now safe in Eric's presence.
I have a friend who I've been friends with 15 years, Chris, and he I would talk to every so often, but he said, what's going on with you? You're different. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm like, just living my life,
just being Eric Brown. I got my Braveheart suit in the trunk, dude. You want me to get it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And don't you love that when people show up and then they validate and they go, whoa, something's different with Eric. What's Eric doing? Mm-hmm. And I love that too, because that's how this work works. And when you all, our listeners, do this work, it is work. And I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, it doesn't have to be the most miserable work of your life. You do bump into some stuff. it gets rough, and that's why we worked together. We still work together, but we work in different capacities now. And so when you bump into this stuff, it comes up, and it's nice to have someone there to guide you, to walk you through it. But as we walked through it and we went through this work, and our listeners are now going through this work, that's part of the process. And mindfulness, in my opinion, has to be at the core of all of this work, because until you cultivate the capacity to shut up and sit with your own suffering and stop dumping it on other people. And that's really what you do in the morning now. You sit with it, and then you can hold it and you can contain it. And then you can call me and say, here's where my week was. And I did a really good job with this. I have awareness around that. You start to realize that illusion of stress and control and attachment and addiction and all the things you used to struggle with, it just starts to just dissolve.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the word work.
Yeah.
And I think there is work. For me, I put the work in, and I wanted to change. And you never told me what to do or how to do it. You just led me there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, when you show up and you do the work, and it's your idea and it's your way of doing it, you take full ownership.
Yep.
That's another piece that's missing in this personal development industry, which is, you don't call me and say, Yetta, here's my problem. And I say, great, Eric, here's the solution. That is a really dysfunctional dynamic in coaching and in consulting. Do I know things that I can bring to you? Absolutely. But you know things too. And in the space of this work, and I really want you guys to hear this, is it's important for you to take ownership of the work and for you to say, who am I? What's my purpose? What am I grateful for? And how can I use that to serve something greater than myself, which is what you learned to do, what I learned to do, what so many people are learning to do in this work. But I love the empowerment that comes from this, because once you get it and you know you're empowered and you have wisdom, you never look for it outside of yourself again.
That's right.
So you now still read books, you'll still go to some events and conferences, you still connect with people and leaders in the community. But I'm curious, can you speak about how you show up differently as an empowered, wise leader, and what that looks like for you in your community of personal development now?
Definitely. When I go to an event, I don't look for the answer within. I'm looking for something outside of me, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm not dependent on someone's words or who they are or what they've accomplished, because I have that within me. I know what I can do and who I am.
Yeah. And I remember the years that you would come in and we would have it all figured out, and then you'd come in and be like, throw it all away. We're doing this because I read this book. Or then we'd get 6 months, throw it all away. No, I'm going in this direction. And I never once argued. I'm like, Eric's on his journey. Eric goes here, Eric goes there. Eric will arrive. And that's the belief I hold with my clients. That my clients will arrive exactly where they need to be when they need to be there. Yeah. And my job is just to keep you hopefully from jumping off a cliff and going with the flow. But some structured emergency is a big word that I use in my coaching. But I love that when you go now, and we talked about this before you went to your last event, you already have all the answers. And what you said is you're not looking for them to tell you what you need to do in here. You already know what you need to do in here. You're looking for an experience to be around like-minded people. Yeah. You're looking for an experience to go, oh, it's like cafeteria style. That really speaks to me. That doesn't. That does. I'll leave that. And then your wisdom is the barometer that now guides Eric Brown to make decisions. And do you still sometimes make some that maybe are great, maybe aren't great? Sure. That's the part of being human, but you're kinder to yourself. And you're like, it didn't really work out. Okay, I'll try something different. Yes. And so that inner freedom and that place of living where stress no longer dominates you as your norm. Imagine if we had a world of leaders, business leaders, community leaders, our family, our friends. And that's why I do this work. And I know you're in the same place now. Once you arrive at it, you can't keep it a secret. You want to tell everybody, but it's almost like I can tell you, but you're going to have to figure out how to do it on your own, because you can't do it the way I did it, because your truth and your wisdom is different than mine. I think it's almost like I've lived invisible for so long. Now I'm invincible. I love it. Yeah. I love it. Yeah. Now you're invincible. Yeah. Invincible Eric Brown. That's what you should put on your business card. Well, Eric, I'm flipping through because I want to just make sure I turn to where we are in the book, because I want to read a quote about your actual testimony. So if you guys are going into chapter 7, we've got cool voices of mindfulness kind of woven throughout the book. And Eric is in chapter 7. Now I gave everybody, and you know this, we gave everybody everybody their ego pseudonames. So when you look at Voice of Mindfulness and you flip over to how we've signed it, it says Thomas E., which stands for Thomas Edison, CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And in your Voices of Mindfulness, you said, I now know it's how you show up that really truly determines your outcomes, because how you show up so greatly impacts other people's beliefs. And I was not showing up as my best self. And so when you show up as your best self and people experience that, it invites them to bring their best self out. And that to me is how you create a culture and a community and a world of kind, compassionate, courageous people. Mm-hmm. So Eric, I want to thank you for showing up today and
thank you.
and
I
being
enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's so much fun. And we've got Robin behind the camera. He's going to take a little picture of us before we head out. But it's just awesome to see your growth, your evolution, to be here in this journey together. We always talked about not only are we working together in the coaching space, but even at some point taking this into a bigger version and vision for other people. No idea where we're going to go with all this, but just the idea of getting you to come up, to shut up, sit down, put your headset on, microphone, just I don't know, hang out and just chat.
I enjoyed it.
It's awesome. And so, guys, if you want to learn more about Eric, we'll put all the information in the show notes of where he works, where he lives. We'll give you his home address. If you need a Braveheart stand, if you need somebody for your kid's birthday to be Braveheart or for an office party, we have the guy right here next to us. And so, as we get ready to kind of wrap up, Eric, are there any final words that you'd like to share with our listeners today? And leave them with some empowerment and education.
I would
and
just,
entertainment. Hey,
I would just say that, just be yourself and have faith in your own decisions and who you are, and just be silent and think about what your aspirations are in life, and don't think about the limiting beliefs why you can't do them, but think why you can do them. So
yeah. Well, I really appreciate you sharing that. You're hearing it directly from somebody who's lived this, been a part of this movement, really from the early days when Eric first started working with me. I think he got a teeny little workbook, and now it's evolved, and who knows where it goes from here. But Eric, it's always a pleasure to hang out and be with you. So for our listeners, you can go to shutupandsit.com. Everything that you need is there. If you have questions, you can reach out, and whatever all the other stuff is that I'm supposed to tell you at the end of the show, you already know all of it. And if not, you'll figure out where to find us and how to connect. And when we come back, we're going to start to move into, and I'm kind of looking forward, into some really cool, exciting statistics about stress. It's a riveting conversation, but one you don't want to miss, because when you can start to understand what stress does to the body, it really is a game changer. So we're going to talk about that on our next episode. So make sure you come back and hang out and shut up and sit with us. So until next time, it's been a pleasure with me, Yetta, with you, Eric Brown. Awesome. High five, my friend. We'll see you on the next episode. Have a great day.
May you know goodness. May you know peace. May you know contentment. May you be